I moved to Northville in '71 and joined the Historical Society in '72. Mr. Gasly invited me to a meeting, and that was the end of it.
And then he got the cigar box to hold the money.
We just kept going to the meetings, and that's when the Ford, Jack Berkman, and Fran were working to get the school at the church. Question.
Why?
Why? Well, I was just interested in saving some of the buildings, and a lot of interesting people
He
belong.
had a wife and 3 children.
Yeah, a wife and 3 children.
Spare time.
And it was a good cause.
Okay.
And we just wanted to
What
see.
year was it you moved to 70?
Moved there in '71.
71.
And joined early '72.
Well, you see, my mind projects you back to 1950.
No, I don't know.
I'm much younger than that.
And you said you lived in a historic house? Or
I lived on the corner of Linden and West Main. Yeah, it was an old Victorian house. So that was.
Whose house was that?
That was oh boy.
Okay.
No,
That
he's
was
a
on-
realtor in Plymouth.
Oh.
Bob Bake, the Bakes.
Oh, the Bake.
And then
Yeah.
it belonged to. After that, it became known as their house, and I can't even remember who we bought it from.
And that's what I was just telling people on the way over. That the houses I sold, the first one, she said, Cynthia said, as they changed it around, as they should have, and threw money at it like it. Everybody's got money. She made it match the old house. I just put a shed roof on it and made it a dormitory like John McGuire did.
So
All right, Bruce?
that's it.
Well, my name is Bruce Butsky, and my recollections, I've thought about this recently, are something like this. Somehow, through Fran, I became aware of the fact that a professor, as I recall, of, let's say, history at some relatively local non-Big Ten university, probably Eastern Michigan or Western Michigan University, was giving a little slide presentation, mostly to women, about saving the Women's Library Association building, or AKA the New School Church building. And so I went to the slide presentation. And last night I was reflecting on it, and I realized that it was kind of dull. He realized he was not the world's best speaker. And partway through the slideshow of buildings that had been saved or buildings in the Northville area that should be saved were under threat of becoming a shopping mall, which happened, or a street extension, which happened, or a parking lot, which happened. These buildings should be saved, and he livened up the slideshow about halfway through by going through these buildings and this, and it was a relatively older audience with a picture of a very attractive young lady in scanty attire.
My wife.
He told us that was just to make sure we were going to pay attention to the rest of the presentation.
And what year was that, Bruce?
I'm guessing that was 1971. I joined the Historical Society within, that year or the next year or something like that. And I had moved to Northville in 1969 and lived on the north end of Center Street. And on my own, I had done my own historical research back to the Yerke family's days when it was a 160-acre farm, and I knew what trees used to be providers of maple syrup, etc. And so I was already into the history thing, and this was a real nice way to do it. And from that point on, it just became more and more involvement. And of course, my wife became involved later on for many years, was on the part of the Historical Society, and part of the Historical Society that was concerned with the Hunter House
She
in
was the
particular.
curator.
Right.
Yeah, she was the curator. I was on the finance committee, such as it was, bigger cigar box
Yes.
in those days, etc. And the bicentennial was in the background, and that became the target date, and it motivated a lot of people, so we didn't have to do a lot of selling. Although, reflecting on it, I took on the assignment of essentially culling the city and township, every breathing person, for donations. And as I recall, we used the Pringle potato chip cans, which were brand new with the plastic lid. We cut a slot in, a machine shop made a tool to cut the slots. We had the can drive at the elementary schools, maybe the high school too. And I found that women alone would do nothing, but if you could pair them, they would have I go in and I make the same kind of slideshow pitch to the women, and for a 2-week period they could go to door in their community and solicit money with the Pringle potato chip can and a nice color photograph of Don Fee, the artist's overhead view of what the village would look like from the air if we were able to get to fruition and get enough buildings moved and restored. So as I recall, we did about $5,000 door to door. And somebody said, come back in 2 weeks, and that was another $5,500. They apparently were involved in litigation, and they won their case. So that's, so we're in pretty good at that point. And then, we're having buildings on site and doing restoration and learning about building electrical and, rough carpentry and finish carpentry and talking people into.
So about what year did you become involved?
I'd say 71 is when I got started, but 72, was
when they really
yeah. And I took the schoolhouse, moving that, say 6 miles as the crow flies, through 3 different jurisdictions, police departments, highway departments, etc. Yeah, and so that was.
Just remember that Bruce very much started the Hunter House.
Yeah.
And he was there when it was done. And anytime there was a question, ask Bruce, because he knew what was going to happen next. And if you're available, he'll be right over there.
Yeah. So
Bruce was there through the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, like I say, at times I question myself, why am I doing this? Because the hours were, I had, I was working 2 jobs at one time, but I was a student for,
Especially when you're tearing the roof off and saying, well, that was the second roof that nobody cared about.
Yeah.
God, we're up tearing the roof off again.
Well, that was a Friday night call. Every Friday evening, you get a call from Fran about tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. We'll be down there doing this and whatever it was.
Yeah.
And I'd say, well, I can't make it. Don't yet. Just we're going to be down there. If you can make it, make it.
Yeah,
that
I
was it.
remember that.
And that's basically how we
Yeah.
met. We met people because they were there. And with Jack Berkman, kind of a forceful leader, if you will, he got some people down there, and sometimes I had to tell him, this is volunteer work. This is not you're going to be hanging it from a clothesline. If you enjoy it, while you're doing it. Some were very serious about it initially.
He was so dressed up always too.
Yeah.
Always dressed up. The other 2 guys were whatever. They happened to come in.
E.A.
But
Chapman.
Jack was always like, and when are the drinks?
Yeah.
It's
Well,
always
he
dressed.
had a business that he had purchased, and in retirement, I guess, staff there told me that he would come in, for 5 minutes, a couple of times a week, and that was it. And then he played a lot of golf.
And he played a lot
And
of
he
golf.
was, he was keeping this whole thing going, putting
He
a lot of
sure
time and
was.
energy into it. So,
Frank?
Bill?
Oh, I was going to go around the table.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, I'm trying to think of why. And I'm trying to think of the era. Old House Journal was just coming along.
Mm-hmm.
And a black man started a thing called Roots. So down at Detroit Library, black people were going into the Burton collection to find out who they were. And the people down at Burton noticed that there were a lot of people coming in black and white, finding out their roots. And just about this time, I was at a school where my department head was the head man of the Farmington Historic Society. And they recognized what had happened in Plymouth, we guess, in the 1920s with the two railroads and the road to Chicago. And they had a whole lot of money, and they gutted their downtown, and they built a whole 1920 downtown, which is still there and beautiful. Well, my department head didn't know what he was going to do with Farmington. It was such a mess with the old Masonic Temple there and the Civic Theater, period. And so he did a logical thing to a person who doesn't investigate very far. Try to hold sucker down. Well, if you know what's there in Farmington, is that, if I got the town right?
Yep, you got it. Yep.
It became a parking lot with stores around it.
Yeah.
And talk about ugly, he had it done. And it was done, and they were lighted, and all the people came and so forth. And living in Northville, when this man came from we don't know where and said he was going to build a 3-story building on Wing Street because the land was cheap and he was going to put an escalator in, we thought, oh, the end of the world. And then the Northville Women's Club, the Lapham Library, I guess it was, they're going to get that sucker and tear that out of there. Well, all at once we're, whoa, trouble down in River City. We've got old people, we've got all the new young people, like, people now gone so far that they've forgotten me.
We're the young people.
maybe they're dead too.
We're the youngsters,
I
Fran.
think
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
People up. What street was up from my house? This front of my house. Went up to OLB.
There?
There.
Yeah.
What was the name of the guy who worked at Ford there?
Stewart. Jim Stewart.
His wife played the piano at Presbyterian Church. I had known him in Detroit.
You got me.
Yeah.
And he was a friend of Davis, of Bill Davis. Anyway, these people had come from, I thought, where the hell did they come from? Now, the reason we got there is that Biz and I were living in federal housing in Quonset huts on the city airport, and our kids were getting to be in kindergarten and first grade. And wife had been teaching in Milford.
It's a commute.
And she lived there before we were married, and so we knew about Milford and the class load, and we knew about Farmington, and we knew about, well, Novi was one-room schools, incidentally.
Yeah.
And they couldn't see to themselves to even build a junior high because they could send them to Northville for nothing, almost. And so I looked at Detroit where I was having 35 in a class and the pay was good. They were actually paying. Northville was not paying. You did it for the love of children. Well, butter doesn't come on the love of children, or gas. And so we decided we'd have to go someplace where there's a low class load. So we're in this Quonset hut on Connors and Gratiot by the city airport. And we went to see my cousin in Northville and liked the looks of it. I hadn't been there since the days we used to go to Clarenceville to see him. Well, we went, we found out there were only 17 on the class road and people wore galluses and, is that what you call the farmers?
Overalls.
Coveralls.
Coveralls.
and the women were wearing gingham dresses, and there were only 17 in a classroom. And my wife said, well, 17 is a pretty nice number. There are a lot of houses and empty lots. And so I said, well, we'll look for a house. So we 2.5 times my salary, and I said, we can afford a $7,000 house. Well, there weren't any. My dad and I looked at without holes all through them. And so I said, I've got to wait a year, and that was in 49. So in the spring of 50, we found a house worth it cost $9,000. And I says, all right, we've got to move sometime because the population is moving so fast. And of course, I'd been teaching a lot of economics and blah, blah, blah. And I realized that the problem is always there's so much geography, but the number of population keeps going like that. And we had the same attitude. We went to the lake property because there are only so many lakes, but I'll tell you, everybody wants to be there. And the longer you wait, the tougher it is. And so we bought a house worth $9,000. And we bought that house. And my wife and I had clothes on, but our children had diapers, and that was about it, and bare feet. And we had an old car, and so I took the bus into Detroit to teach.
Bluebird Bus Company?
No, it was the Northville coach line.
Okay, at that time.
Formerly, for 2 years, it had been the Dearborn coach line. And then Ford built a glass house.
Yeah.
And I guess tore down the old administration room. I don't know about that. But I know
Later.
the glass house went up, and these people from the glass house went along Heinz Drive, and you end up at a racetrack.
Yeah.
And they all looked at the racetrack, and Davis was there, and Ed, I forgot his name, that lived up there by OLV, who worked with Davis at Ford. Anyway, these people started coming out, and here we are with an old secondhand clunker, and our children's friends are having 2 rentals from Ford. One is a station wagon, and another is a convertible. And they're saying, can we have a horse like the people up on Hello? We said, well, if you can find a place for it, you feed it every morning and night, and you lift up the buns and throw the buns out in the road or something, you can have one. But they said, we don't think we want a horse. Okay. So we stayed there, and the lady across the street, next to us was this big empty lot. It was 150 feet. Ours was about 125 or something. And it was empty space. And the man across the street, Mr. Babbitt, wouldn't mow, and he hated mowing that. Remember, there's no gas in any of the mowers at the time except your own gas, of which you left a lot out in the air. And she said, I don't think my kids are coming back to live across the street. Well, now, of course, everybody knew you don't live across from your mother. And so they stayed in California. Once they moved, they went to California and stayed right there. And how would you like to buy that for $1,000? I said, $1,000? Guys, we've only got 2 diapers for each kid now. Well, I went to credit union and said, could I have $1,000? Yeah, here it is. And I'm like, oh my God, that was too easy. And so I bought that for $1,000, and then I got to mow it. Good old Hugh Babbitt. And my daughter-in-law's grandfather. And so that's how we got there. And my wife joined a women's club and went to this old church building on Wing Street and became the Northville. That was by 60, she joined that, I think. And the Davises lived in finally 5 houses, didn't they? Bill and Marge Davis. They started in a little house on what road I've forgotten, what street in town. And then they built one, and then they built another, and they built another. Then they went to Main Street and built one there. Like, oh my God, everything's going up. And I'm still driving used cars as usual, and taking the bus into Detroit. And when the fireworks was when that guy said he's going to build a 3-story with escalators in it. Well, this is 1970, blah, blah, blah. One, maybe two. And things took a nosedive economically.
Yes, they did.
And so
In real estate.
he said, well, we won't have 3 stories, we'll have 2 and 1 escalator. And then some other highfalutin idea went out the window too with no dollars, because I've forgotten who the president was, but anyway. And the city was owning the place where McGuire had his store on Katy and Center. And that whole section of Katy Street, the city bought up so that it could have the land on both sides of Alexander Court, which was an alley at the time. And on the other side, it was all little houses, twice as big as this room. And the Downs wanted more parking, so that gave incentive to the city and the Downs to get into that mess and start tearing houses down.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the thing is, the bowling alley on the corner, nobody goes there much, we'll tear down the bowling alley.
Yeah.
On the corner of whatever, I've forgotten the corner, on
Main Center.
the west side of
Yeah.
Center
Yeah.
Street.
Yeah.
And then there was a duplex next to it where the Connollys lived. Ken Connolly and his wife and 2 children lived there, and he had to move up right across from OLV to be out of there and have Ron Skipper come and rent from him. Ron Skipper, wasn't he the coach or something? Math teacher?
Don't know.
He finally went to Central City, Iowa,
Mm.
with Central College. And that started emptying that area out down there, and people could see the change going on. And that's when the city bought the buildings on the south side of Maine, west of the big pit where the
Mm-hmm. Hotel had
the
been
hotel had burned. And
half a century
I loved
earlier
it.
or
I
something.
loved
Yeah.
I love that empty space.
Yeah, just a big hole in the
Just a
ground.
big hole, a big
Still a
hole,
big hole line.
right in the
For
four
decades
corners.
and
Where do you
decades.
live? I live at the four corners next to the hole,
Yeah.
and it's called the Northville Hotel. Well, where is it? Show me upstairs. There's a little place upstairs, and there's a restaurant downstairs and a billiard room or something I didn't know. And so people got interested in saving that building, and it went like wildfire with your canisters to 2
Yeah.
women from door to door, petitions that I ran off on a mimeograph
Yes,
machine
yes.
with all that
I
purple
remember
stuff on my
mimeograph
head.
machines too.
And
the
at
ink
school,
and mess and-
I stole that from the Detroit Board of Education.
Yeah.
And handed those out to everybody. And Koenig, everybody was there. They all wanted one. I'll take one. I'll take one. I'll take one. And then Jack got a friend who had a band that rehearsed on Thursday nights who would come for nothing. And then Giancarlo got whoopee-doo because he thought that...
Racetrack manager, right? Yeah.
Right.
Carlo.
Oh, and I just met a woman in here who was in a little white building, which was twice as big as this room, right by his house,
Right.
where there was a restaurant, and this woman ran the restaurant. She said, "What is the name of the man that ran it?" I said, "John Carlo and Margaret Sadie." She goes, my God, where do you get that from? I said, it's back there. And anyway, both those buildings are gone. And so Jack got this, hoodwinked this fellow, and Carlos built that, or somebody built the second hotel. There was another one called, I've forgotten what, one story. And then Carlos built this big, because he thought the expressway was going to come in at 5.
All at 5
Right.
mile, right?
And
Yeah.
the county gave him the finger and put it at 6 or something. You
Yeah,
know.
the on and off ramp
Yeah.
was not at
It
5.
was not at 5. And oh my God, the end of the world.
That was called Hillside.
Yeah.
That's it.
Became a
That's it.
senior setter. My mother spent 8 years living there. Yes,
And
right across from Phoenix Lake.
Bob just died there.
Russell.
Bob Russell.
Bob Russell just died there.
Yeah.
Okay. So we had parties there and made hundreds of dollars, sometimes thousands of dollars. People came from the woodwork. People you'd never ever see. There they were at this dinner dance, and here we were making money and throwing nails at Bruce and Jim and, oh God. Going
Well,
in.
the dinner dance was, that and the Tivoli Fair were
Tivoli
two,
Fair
two
was
of the
Then,
big money
then
makers.
John Carlos says,
Yeah.
you can have the bottom of the grandstand. We're like, oh my God. And that just, everything happened
Yeah.
after that. It all became money and boards and,
Well, you knew it was real when you saw the old library building going down Main Street.
oh,
Yeah,
that,
that's
that.
right.
And then they decided that Griswold should go through and take the one
Take the
Hunter
Yerkes
House.
They had the Hunter House
Yeah.
In the
right
right of way.
behind it, and the two of them went, and we said, boy, now we're in deep doo-doo.
Yeah.
we're still biting, and we're dumb. We're just, and there was no life other than feeding children, wife and children, and going down and being at,
Mill race.
you know. And Jack Berkman was, a story. Sometimes tragedies almost happen and you breathe when it doesn't happen. About Mike Allen's wife having a heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
You know about that?
This was previous to Betty, correct?
Much.
Yeah. All right.
Betty was later in life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so there was trouble with the council. Jack was doing a great job with the council, and I was doing the Friday night rings, and everybody was coming. I couldn't believe them. Then we found that there were the two courts that wanted some place for the people to work on Saturday. And we got people there, but what I didn't realize was the amount of, well, say it quickly to the point, pot smoking that went on with people who came who were drivers of automobiles who were stuck because they went too fast, but they were still driving with cigarettes, smoke. Yeah, send 4 guys over to clean the floor, and or send 4 guys over to do the 3 people. And some people came, whatever. But the bad part, the almost bad part was that Mike Allen's wife had a heart attack, and there was a trouble with getting the EMS because the EMS was undependable, and the council was always trying to find a dependable EMS. Is that the right word?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Thank you. And and they were changing them all the time. And right in the middle of it, Mike Allen's wife got a heart attack, and the EMS never came, and she died. Well, now, the stuff went through the roof on that one, and so they had to find somebody else. And she died, yes. And so Mike wanted her in the Yerkes Cemetery. Oh, disaster. Jack, his buddy, working to get mill race done and get a lot of help, is the head of the Yerkes Cemetery.
Sure.
They voted it down. She doesn't go. We're like,
Oh, no.
Mike took it nicely, though, and said that's okay. And you remember the guy who worked for Ford who got the property from Ford?
The mill race site, yeah.
Yeah.
Site.
Canterbury?
Canterbury.
John
Canterbury. On
Right.
that angled street
Yeah,
that went
Randolph.
Randolph.
Lived on
Randolph.
Randolph.
off. And he got that for us. He must have been born with the black and white suit on. Because he always looked like he was, anytime he come out of the house or go in, he was always in that black and white suit. And I didn't know if he was going to Ford Motor Company or home.
Yeah.
But he was always in proper attire for whatever the event, and he wouldn't go to an event where he wouldn't have a black and white suit on. And that worked out very well. And that's how we got the property. It sounds simple, but I know it wasn't.
No, sure was,
I've
Jack
simplified so many things in my life.
I think Berkman was the big wheeler dealer on that, wasn't he?
Who?
Pretty much Jack Berkman on getting the
Oh
property.
yes,
Yeah.
with
That's what I remember.
oh yes, oh very much.
Yeah.
And maybe you don't know. Did you know what Jack's job was at the time?
I don't remember.
His son had started a business of how do you decide credit?
Credit check.
Credit check.
Credit check. All right.
And he said, Dad, you don't want to work anymore. Why don't you start your own credit check thing out in Howell at the county offices there? I guess that's where it was. Oh, I says, okay, I'll do that. So Jack spent his time with his envelopes with his stuff in, and he was on the phone all the time doing credit checks. And that was his income at the time, to my knowledge. Because I knew he was on the phone at home when I would go to see him, talking to people about that, in between asking about how was our account at Black's drugstore.
Or hardware store.
Yes, the hardware, that's right. That's right.
Drugstore is now probably.
Yes. And there were only a few times when I could see at mill race where the probation
Price, yeah.
people were sitting around, and you noticed this haze over top that didn't move. And you didn't want to walk too close, or you might just stay right there. And I think that was fun. That was sort of like a thing maybe you didn't know.
Well,
I met a guy at teaching, and he was a good tennis player. And I says, he's got a tennis court in Farmington. I said, well, how do you do that? Well, he said, I got a lot of kids. I said, what do you do? Well, he says, all you have to do is buy asphalt. And I thought, well, in college I rolled the clay courts. You could do that. He says, well, try. So I went out to the gravel pit and said, I want, a truckload of clay, and laid out. And no trucker would put clay in their truck. They'd never get it out.
Right.
And 2 or 3 guys say, how do you go for asphalt? And I said, whoa, never heard of such a thing. Well, I listened and said, well, $600 will do it. Well, I'd already gotten $1,000 from the Teachers Credit Union. And I said to them, am I good for $600? And they said, yes. So I said, all right, kids, this is going to be the deal. You're going to dig holes. You're going to make cement. You're going to get pipes down at the dump. And you're going to get them out. You're going to take them to the hardware store and get them threaded. We're going to stick them up, and we're going to get chicken wire. We're going to have a tennis court. They're like, no shit. Well, we had one of those things, clouds, over our tennis court. The kids would come and sit at the trees there waiting to play. But at home, we would decide when to open the kitchen window if we wanted to inhale or not. because, but the cops never stopped because they knew where the kids were. And they had that under control. They didn't have the smoke under control, but they had that. And that was one of the fun things that my wife and I laugh about every once in a while, finding Zephyr papers in the glove compartment of the car.
You know, I may have met you, or at least seen you, at your tennis court, because when we moved to Northville, my wife and I played tennis. And we saw what appeared to be, since Northville was, 4,800 people at the time, kind of easy going. We thought it was the public course, court. And so we play tennis there, and he never came out and chased us off or anything. But yeah, it was...
Our kids would sit there, and the people would say the car would park on the other side of the street in front of Mays. Nobody would ever see. And our kids would go out with a girlfriend or boyfriend and sit there and wait till the people were done and said, well, what is this, a public? No, it's we live in that house over there. Oh, we're so sorry. We thought it was a public place. And the ones that went by, the only ones where we really made out on it was Sundays when Hal Wright and his family would go to Plymouth to get the New York Times. And they'd always stop and say, do you want a New York Times today if you got 50 cents? And we'd say, yeah, we'd have it. So, and I saw Hal Wright just before I came here. Poor Hal, I thought, God, I'm not going to get like that, so I straightened right up. You know what Hal Wright looks like?
Nope.
No, not like that.
No.
And, he was, well, the job he had anyway was enough to make you want to do that.
Yeah.
Because his final job was the big house.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So,
Well, Bill hasn't had his turn yet. Back to the original subject.
All right. Yeah, remind me again, Linda.
When did you join and why did you join?
And why are we here?
And why are we here?
All right. Basically, my wife, Carol Jean, and I, we got married in '70. We rented a house in Dearborn, and we always liked historical things. We were looking for some neat old place, and this one became available in Northville. We closed and moved in on April 1st. How appropriate, huh?
The joke was on you.
Yes, it sure was. And we got these kids from the old neighborhood to help us move in, trailer load after trailer load, and there we were, and the house was just in terrible condition. So, like, these guys, to some degree, it was a matter of restoring our house at the same time as working at Mill Race on various things. I didn't have any one big project like Bruce or Fran, but just worked on a number of things. But that whole time period of the early to mid 70s was just hugely exciting. There was just a lot of things happening in town. Basically, what essentially would be a major part of the center of town was going to be leveled for this shopping mall. And what we called at the time the old library building, which we now know as the New School Church, was going to be torn down, or else it had to be moved. And somehow or another we ended up joining the Historical Society, which, as I recall, at the time we met in the basement of the City Hall.
City Hall, yeah.
And I can remember one meeting anyway where Berkman had finagled the deal with Ford to get the property, and we needed a name for the village. And I can remember that particular meeting. We had a vote. We had 4 to 6 names. And Mill Race Village was the one that was voted on, to be the name of the
And it was
village.
chosen by Jack. Jack submitted that name.
All right, maybe he did, yeah. But there was a vote by the general
Yes, there were 2 or
membership.
3 names that came down.
yeah.
Our,
And
our
it-
meetings before that were in the basement of the Detroit Edison building.
All right, yeah,
Which is the building on the
Center.
northeast of Center and Montgomery.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And, at any rate, I can remember that meeting having maybe 50 to 70 people in it. And as I say, things were just very exciting. We had monthly meetings in and around that time. I think my wife was the one that was responsible for getting a program for each of those meetings, which was done. We had classes and so forth, but I'm getting ahead of myself. That was after the buildings had been moved, but that was a big deal. Actually moving those buildings, like Bruce was saying, when you see the new school church going down Main Street, and of course that was before Main Street 78, when the clock and the island and all of that stuff was put there. It was like a regular 2-lane road. A lot of the lines had to be moved and so forth to get it down. And it was, as I recall, it was Clay Hofsas with his old truck and all of that cribbing and stuff. Yeah. And, all of those buildings just being gutted that lived, that were in that whole square. I can remember that the new school church was heated with steam radiators, because our house was also. And the radiators were just being tossed, so I figured, well, what the heck?
That's what my dad, when I bought the house, my dad said, what kind of heats you got? I don't know, these ugly big things about these things. They said, Francis, it's either hot water or steam. I said, oh, that's good.
Yeah. But they all had air vents, and of course air vents were expensive for a young couple to replace, so I just went around and gathered up all of the air vents from the radiators that came out of the new school church. And I'm still.
That's where they went. We always wondered about
that. So we were active. I mean, this was very exciting for a young couple.
But one of the nicest pictures I ever took, and I knew you were going to ask. You and your dear wife and a child, on one of you, and her head is like this, and you're standing at the newel post that you had made, the basement. I want to picture that newel post of the several many you made, which vanished off the bridge and wherever. And there you are with Carol Jean and this little girl who spent 20 years managing the damn place.
Right.
My God, I got old.
The picture Fran is talking about, I was holding Juliet.
Yeah.
Who was our oldest at the time, who ended up becoming the business, office manager and so forth, and still does work there part-time. And we were in the new school church, which was all, being renovated on the inside. And, and it's interesting how, 6 years ago, we redid that same floor that we laid so many years ago. When the building
I said to
first was moved
Reinholz,
there.
get over there. You were there when the first one, at least look at it.
Yeah, I remember getting a call from Bill. Where'd that floor come from?
What was the details on that floor? Because we kind of wanted to know before we tore it up what we were going to get into.
Well, you didn't have Milton Koenig on the second floor.
No,
Milton was there on the first.
Right, yeah, he was gone.
He was the
by that
structural
time.
engineer that made sure that, Professor, that second floor balcony was supported at the basement level on up.
Yeah.
Just in case as many people that you could get up there were up there.
And then he made the mistake of, and then I brought another story. We couldn't get up because there was no piece of machinery to get you up to work to take everything off of all this stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
And I remembered in high school I had a friend whose father rented cement mixers and stuff down on West Chicago and Grand River, where we'd go Saturdays just to be somewhere. Well, the people were renting stuff, And I remember Schuster Equipment, Paul Schuster. This friend Gassler from, where the hell have you been all the time? I need a 2-story elevated with wheels. Take it off your income tax, whatever, as long as it works. A week later, it arrived on his truck. He never saw him, just was on the phone, and there it was. And so Milt got up there and was taking that last section of the 1x2s or 2x2s or 2x4s, and he did the last hammering on it, and it did a beautiful hinge job. Went right out through the window. That beautiful green glass, it was 100 years old. Great job. He was right up on the top, man. It was perfect, just perfect. Took the whole window. Wow.
But we never lost a man, though.
Never lost
No, never lost a man. That's
Well,
right.
we had a lot of people get tetanus shots before they went on the restoration tour of duty. And I was Fran talking about, probationary people or public service people from the court system. I remember this one chap was working there on the Hunter House, and the basement is cinder block faced with stone above grade level, so it looks more or less like,
Original,
stone
yeah.
foundation. Except this was a fellow that looked like he'd been in a few fights, and he had use of one eye only, from Detroit. And he just told me, I didn't ask him, he just told me, he says, well, I'm from Detroit. I said, well, I understand that. And he said, he's in his 40s, maybe, late 30s, early 40s. He said, in Detroit, you either fight or you run. And I fight. And if you look closely at the Hunter House as you go up the steps, on one side you'll see the butt end of a beer bottle, because that helped fuel his days working on that, facing on the
That's
foundation.
beautiful.
After you told me about that last
Yeah.
summer, I went and looked.
It's there.
And they were threatening to take it out because it wasn't, when they did the porch again,
Yeah.
I said, you may not touch that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
There's a story.
Good for you.
Yeah, yeah.
And the Indian who worked on the stone. The Indian guy who was always dressed with no top. And in the hot weather, the women were coming around. Like, can we help you? No, I'm a stonemason. I'd like to help you. And this guy had a bandana around his head, and knives stuck.
Oh,
in
yeah, I
his-
remember that. Yeah.
Knives stuck in his belt and everything. We're like, and his car had no lights.
Yeah.
Or whatever that vehicle was.
We, one of the movers, and I don't want to identify by name because I'm not sure, but one of the movers, the first time I met him was at Mill Race, and there was this gentleman that had a bandana on, bear top, and I have an idea who it was, but I'm not positive. Anyway, I wanted to find this guy, so I said, "Are you Mr. So-and-so?" And he was working down there with the cribbing and the grease on it and this and that. And he looks up at me and he says, "No." Well, I knew it was him. So 3 times I asked. And the third time I asked him, he said, "Are you a revenue agent?" And I said, "Hell no." And at that point, we had a conversation.
Got that straightened out.
Yeah, I got it straightened out.
What building was that?
I don't know. It seems to me it was a new school church. It could have been.
It was Hofs's.
Yeah. Does that
It was
fit the bill?
houses, yeah.
From Louisiana, let's say? Or?
Well, we could never get a hold of him. He'd
Okay.
show up
There-
one day.
there-
We say,
there-
"Well, we want the building shoved back onto the foundation. We'll get a hold of Hofs's."
Yeah. Hard to do.
Can't do it.
Because he won't answer to his name for one
Okay,
thing.
so when the Methodist church in town was going to be gutted, and I went to whoever was going to do that, and I said, we would like to have the pews for the Historic
Right.
Society to sell. And he said, well, who are you? Historic Society, blah, blah, blah. We'll do it on a Saturday, any day. Any Saturday that's good for you, we can get people out to sell them. So there were all those beautiful pews that I don't know how much money we could make. And the guy says, yeah, you can do that. And I forgot who it was. It must have been the contractor for the building. I'm not sure of that. But at least he seemed to be responsible enough to say, I'll be there on that Saturday and you can sell them. We'll have my men move them out and you can sell them. So we sold them all. And
Kept 1 or 2 for the new school church.
right.
Yeah.
And so then weeks and weeks later, phone call to my house. You Mr. Gasly? Yes. You work at Storage Society? Yes. What happened to the pews? I'm like, I don't know to whom I'm speaking. It's like, what happened to the pews? I'm like, well, and I said, to whom am I speaking? He says, it's none of your business. He says, we supply restaurants with all their needed. Right away, I'm like, oh, restaurant supplies. Here we go. He said, where'd the money go? And I told him how much it was that we made. He said, well, that isn't too much, that's right, but I just want you to know that somebody's watching you people and anything that you had that you might have taken out of the church because we're very interested. We knew that was not a nice guy like Toko or somebody.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to talk any more about that.
Yeah, that was.
He knew where I was, but I didn't know where he was.
That's where he did the conversion of that church
Into
into
the
a
drawbridge.
restaurant called the Castle.
No, the drawbridge.
The drawbridge, I'm sorry, yes. To look like a German castle
Right.
with,
And it ended
Man-made
up looking more
stonework.
like Disneyland.
right?
It looked like Disney. And,
after-
and the bar was on the second floor.
And some time passed, a few years, and my wife, being at the Historical Society and having a good image in town with the village and everything, she was approached by the owner, who was an attorney, and he asked what he could do to improve his business. Now, this business was suffering financially, and there were weeds growing everything, and she said, well, what you could do first is, trim, get rid of the weeds and put plantings in where you can, etc., and clean the place up. And then shortly later, they went bankrupt, and the newspaper report, if I remember right, that he said, we made almost $1 million a year. Actually, that was their intake. They spent slightly more than that each year, and it caught up with them.
Yeah.
It was-
I want to get back, because I don't know, and I'm sure a lot of people
Oh.
don't know, what Tivoli Fair was. Jim?
Tivoli Fair was
Scandinavian theme.
yeah, Scandinavian theme, right?
Annual
It was
event
from
for
Sweden.
fundraising.
Yeah.
And we'd have all these people who made handmade goods
Yeah.
come in
Okay.
and sell them.
Okay.
And I think that started in
I think
72.
I think it started with my wife, or shortly thereafter, and she was living for a number of years. Tivoli Fair is hour-wise the major driver, because she's discussed this with me this holiday season. It was associated with, I think, Christmas and the holidays
Correct, yeah.
as a good time to sell things. And I remember once we just had a portable bulletin board, a couple of them that were donated by somebody, metal frame, no wheels, drag it around, lift it up, whatever. And I can remember her hand cutting in Old English type font, large letters, which must have taken her 20 or 30 hours just to put a header up that said Bill Race Village and something underneath it. And then there was all this handwork that people had done, cutting out like stencils in very small detail, etc. And there were photographs mounted, and it was kind of like, this is where we were, this is where we're going, this is where we are right now. And then the people that came in, their craft was an old craft. The Teeters probably were there with weaving.
All right.
Okay.
So,
And they got the wool from sheep that live next to where I live now.
and so they got Don Sober, his wife, who was such a craft person that
Yeah. Marianne.
she was doing things for people's adaptability and who had hand manipulation problems, and she was doing things for helping people where I don't know what her job was, but I know what she was working on, and she was good at caning. And
Right.
Don got to be very good at caning, I got to seeing him where he'd have a bucket of water here and a bucket of water there with a cane coming out in a chair up on a little stool, and he's doing all this. Well, I didn't know how this was going at Tivoli Fair. I didn't know how big Tivoli Fair was. And Don always saw me in the dirty clothes that I had. That
Yes.
I refused
Yes.
to wash those clothes. And we were accustomed to seeing each other there. Well, I went in while Tivoli Fair was on during the day,
Yeah.
at like 1 or 2 in the afternoon. I took the afternoon off to go and see how Tivoli Fair is coming along. I found it was just loaded with people.
Yes.
Well, you had to know Don Sober. I didn't know Don Sober. He was never like that. He was there all by himself. And man, I mean, he was caning like mad and having it. And there's women with little children in push carts and so forth. They're all down there. And his wife was doing something over there. What she was doing, I don't know. But she was right there by him. And so it's middle of the afternoon, I should be at work, but I wasn't. I had a suit on with a tie and like real people.
Yeah.
Just like John Canterbury.
Yeah, like John Canterbury. I come up there and I said, "Now, sir, how do you do the thus and so?" And he went, "Well, and all at once he looks up and says, Jesus Christ, Cassie, what the shit are you doing here, for Christ's sake?" Well, mothers are grabbing children. His wife said, "Donald, no, Donald, not here, not here." Well,
Have to
then a
act
funny
different
thing
here.
happened at a
Differently
dance.
here.
So there's a dance. And Don Sober is there. Don Sober. Yeah, mustache. Little mustache.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my brother-in-law is there with his wife, and his brother-in-law is there because everybody's going, because you've got to put your money in mill rate. So we have all the relatives and everything.
Yeah. You're working everybody over. Yeah.
And so, no, we're not at the dance. We're at the
Homes tour?
Home
or-
tour.
home tour.
Okay.
And the, what are the big house, what's it called?
Yerkes or?
Yerkes.
Yeah.
Filled with people and punch glasses and
Yeah,
candles
yeah,
going on.
Yeah.
And so my brother-in-law says, "Who's that big guy that's so loud? He's got this nice little mustache.
Yeah.
I've seen him somewhere. I've seen him somewhere."
Yeah, his voice was like a public address system.
My brother is short. Well, Don's over there and says, "Fred, who is that little short guy over there? You know, with the white beard and stuff." I said, "That's my brother-in-law." He says, "Well, what's his name?" I told him his name. "I've seen that guy. I've seen him before." All at once, Sober comes back to me like half an hour later. "I found out who it is. I found out who it is." He said, "But I don't know him." I said, "Well, where do you see him?" He says, "Every day I go to work. I get on the elevator, and that guy's on the elevator, going to the 6th floor to Albert Klein. Yeah, he's an architect. That's my brother-in-law." "Oh, no, shit, Jesus Christ." He goes, "What are they?" "Oh, that's what we saw you on the elevator. Every day for so many years I've seen you on the elevator." Oh, there. So that's how the money came in.
Yeah.
Everybody had their relatives go to everything. You have to go or it won't survive.
So, but it was a whole town effort. I mean, it wasn't just some.
Absolutely.
And the thing I forgot too is that not just the new young people coming in knew that the town was going to be ruined, but the old people knew. Well, I remember the other blacksmith shop. Why are you doing that blacksmith? The other blacksmith shop was over, and so had that one, and you should be building that blacksmith shop instead of the one you're building. Old people were incensed about this thing of tearing out this stuff they wanted to tear out, and Jim and I are on the Historic District Commission trying to get them to take down the damn signs so that you could see the buildings, you know. And oh, dear, it was so funny.
Okay, so originally you were trying to keep the church where it was, the new school church, or old school?
No,
Okay, it was always your intention to move
we had
it?
no choice.
There's
Yeah,
no
it was
choice.
either tear it down or move it.
Somebody had bought the property.
How did you light on the location? Just because it was close and the wide
Short move
Free.
and vacant, and Ford realized they were not
Available,
going to
yeah.
expand on that site.
And none of us knew it was a flood site.
That didn't occur to you. Nothing had been down there
we would've
for
hauled-
100 years.
We would have hauled
150
dirt
years.
or boulders or something in first.
Yeah.
Well, we only had a couple floods. The one
Yeah.
I saw was the one that scared me. Was we had basements in the buildings, and the water crested the earthworks. It was already roaring over the concrete dam or spillway. And I get over there, and it kind of shocked me at first, but then I realized that it's all downhill, and
Yeah.
a matter of time, hours or whatever.
Basically below sea level
Yeah.
of the pond.
Yes,
Yeah.
and but that it's going to, it's just running downstream, and it's not going to stay here. And then, of course, you realize at that point that you're happy that the archives, the paper stuff, was at a higher level, et cetera, et cetera. And that's how the schoolhouse now has external and not underneath, heating and air conditioning. Besides, we wanted to make it look as it did originally, but of course, crawling on your belly over gravel down there to maintain
Bruce-
equipment is kind of
Bruce, we've
expensive.
been saved though, because we have the grief center. And
Yeah.
in case you get too much, you can always go there.
Yeah.
At the grief center.
But
That
one of the
pays rent
things
to the city.
concerning the new school church was E.A. Chapman, I believe, built that miniature of the new school church
Model, yes.
model, and he
E.A.
and
Chapman, Jack Berkman, and
sober.
On sober.
No,
No?
not sober. It was another chap, however. The name is on it.
all right. But that would be towed in the July 4th parades on a cart, again with a sign on it, and to try to raise funds for the restoration.
And Don Fee, who early on did a rendering of the area we were taking this to, and placed all the buildings. And as it turns out, most of those buildings that he had on there are there.
Right.
Came to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Either came to be,
And,
moved there, or a
right.
couple, new construction, but in the old style.
So the idea was always out there to create a village, not just as a repository.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So you had an
He,
organized.
he apparently was up in an airplane with the door open, hanging out, and took a picture of it, or someone.
Well,
But I think
yeah,
it was him.
I
And then
got the helicopter for him.
Oh,
I
helicopter.
didn't get the ride.
he didn't get that.
he got the ride. He got this $2,000 Hasselblad camera from where he works at Exhibit Works, and he flew over the thing, hanging out
Yeah,
the door,
angling out the open
taking
door.
the
yeah.
pictures, and it turned out all right.
Yeah.
And he made two models of it. One of them, well, I remember we had it in the bank for how many weeks, months, I don't know. And any place anybody wanted it, where there was public, we would have this model. And what happened to the first one, I don't remember. So he made a second one because something happened to the first one. Don was very good about
He's a
it.
very talented
Oh,
guy
Yeah. Yeah.
as a designer.
Sat when he too was on the board of directors, and
Right.
he sat with Jim and I on the Historic District Commission.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
you
that-
had this whole plan and this picture and everything when you went to Ford? Or did you get the land first, or what was the?
I don't. The land came first.
Yeah,
as
I think that's
recall.
right.
Yeah.
The land's owned by the city, the buildings by the Historical Society.
And the intent is for the preservation of old buildings of the city of Northville.
And Linda, when you tell people about this arrangement, they're just astounded that here there is nothing official, there's nothing on paper as to whose responsibilities are what, but yet this thing came together and it has worked together and it has been supported and encouraged, of course, by the city.
Yeah.
And, to have this thing exist for this long and work out this well, is really astounding.
It shouldn't happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think the fact that we had a bicentennial date of July the 4th, was the focus, and my wife and I, on Saturdays, we had a deal worked out because we're pushing for that date where we'd invite people to come work at the village and get as much done as we could get done, particularly on the exterior of the buildings, because we had this date. And we would say this, come as soon as the sun's up, something like that, and work till 1, and then we'd have the beer kegs and the food that we put out there, my wife and I.
Yeah.
And we got up, I got pictures showing, close to 70 people on scaffolds and,
Right.
what have you on Saturday mornings. They work through, sunrise kind of thing, right through, to the, 1 o'clock thing, and then we're done.
By
Okay.
the 76 parade of 1976 parade, we had the Governor Milliken, I guess it was, come in the parade. And he was going to come to the village to give a speech, so we would get him in the village. A couple of days before, the fellows with the green glasses came, big men with green glasses. Now, this is what you will do. I said, hold it. You're not on your property. This is our property. I will decide. As if I knew. This is what you will do. The car will go to the gate. The man will walk this, and then he'll go over the bridge. He'll go to the front of that little building. He'll give his speech there, come over, and go back. He said, well, we wouldn't. That's your problem. Our problem is he wants to be here. We want him here. Don't get in the way. I'm like, Gasly, what have you been doing? And it turned out just like they said.
That was
Just
beautiful.
like-
It was a sunny
And
morning.
the guys with the black glasses were standing all around everyone shooting.
Had the ecumenical church service, maybe 6,600 people altogether for the day, by some estimates. I remember that number. And it went very, very well.
Had choirs from several churches
Beautiful
at the
weather.
same time.
Yep.
You know. And you, of course, got the beautiful weather for us. Thank you very much.
Okay. You're never sure when you have an event, a fixed date, what's going to happen. Yeah. Kind of
Yeah, you
thing.
could have had a flood, right?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that was, like I say, that's just,
Oh, another
part of the
thing
game.
that I remember Jim helped me with. I had a cousin die. Well, actually, he was my mother's cousin, and down. So Jim and I went down. I guess you got a trailer. I didn't have a trailer.
I don't remember how we did. Yeah, we had a trailer.
God, we got stuff, oak furniture that to haul to the auction, and haul that stuff to the auction. Furniture of all kinds that nobody wanted, except the people in Northville wanted to put it in an old house, And we just took it there for 4th of July, and it went like wildfire.
yeah.
That we got for nothing.
So the auctions were held, you had a series of auctions, right?
Oh,
Yeah, for-
every
Well,
many years.
yeah,
4th of
I
July.
mean,
But it was 4th of July.
you'd have a table set out there, really just about a card table, with some canisters and this and that. And I used to really enjoy it, given the pitch, because I didn't sit out. I went out and I got people and brought them into that activity. It was a lot of fun.
By the end of it, we were having the auction in front of the school, and John,
Bergerman?
No.
the flowers, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, horticulturalist, yeah. John Brueggemann,
He
yeah.
had sold some kind of flowers he grew in the backyard.
Mums.
Yeah,
Hardy
chrysanthemums, yeah.
Hardy mums. Yes.
He grew great strawberries too, I can tell you that, besides the mums. Not on his property, but on an undeveloped property next door.
Next door, right?
Next door, yeah.
Yeah, he borrowed that land.
Yeah, he did.
Well, they finally built a school there or something.
Yeah, yeah. They little sub in the
Is that
school
the
and went
Thurston
in.
School?
Thornton Creek.
Thornton Creek.
yeah.
There you
Something
go.
like that.
When you said it, it took me a while. I had it this time. Thornton Creek Elementary, yeah. That's where the water supply came from two wells, way northwest of the city of Northville, down to the low point, down at Taft and 8 Mile. And when they have, this rapid economic growth of the 70s and whatnot, housing, somebody built a house on Beck Road directly over one of those wells that's in an old map that Brueggemann provided to the Historical Society. It was published in their monthly newsletter, quarterly, I should say, Millrace Quarterly. And, the wise people in Novi there, where I live now, didn't know the old history, and they paid the price because that basement is full of sand. You open the basement door and you're looking at sand because that's the only thing that keeps the cinder block from falling in. And and the other tributary, the other spring that went into that water to Northville, city of Northville, had a beehive brickwork over the top. And my son and I saw a couple deer. He was about 6 years old, and we were out hiking, and nothing had been developed there. And, I noticed that, hey, the deer were in the sun. There was some snow. They were taking the sun. They saw us. They got up and they left. But it was like a little hill. We got there, and we found this brickwork with a, cast iron grating on the top. And some of the bricks had fallen in from the dome. And the light was just perfect, and I could see two streams coming in from each pipe of the two springs. And that pipe goes right behind Thornton Creek, and the pipe is broken, and that's what gives the pond back there.
Oh, yeah.
Creates the pond. On the right day with the right sunlight, you can see the bubbles sometimes come up from where the pipe is
This
broken.
is before 8 Mile is moved, is that right?
It's the junction where these two came together in this cistern, I'll call it, or dome structure. That's northeast of 9 Mile and Beck. It goes all the way down there. It's quite an engineering feat, to my mind, to get the grade right, to gravity flow water all the way
I
down.
took a picture of John holding a large staff at Taft Road before 8 Mile went through, where the water went to that big stone basin that had a stone building of story and a half
Okay.
tall that I took a picture of, but not enough to place it exactly.
Okay. That must have been further along the route of the piping.
Let's get back to the buildings. Are there any stories about moving them or things that happened? I know the Yerkes had an interesting move in that it took forever to get it over there.
Well, it did. The interesting part of that move is it was setting up on a hill, and the mover, it wasn't Hoff's this time. It was
No, somebody else.
Somebody else had to take it off the hill,
What time have you got?
and
We're looking
we
at
were
about 11:45.
Okay, thank you.
very concerned about the thing coming off of the house,
Sliding off the trailer.
Yeah.
or the-
I think Walnut
And,
Street.
right,
Beats, yeah.
yeah. So, but he had it lashed down pretty good. But it was a pretty good hill.
Yeah, coming
When he
down
just
there.
took it off
Yeah.
the foundation and started down the hill, I didn't know.
And he tied it on carefully, but big trees were along there, big maple trees, and he tied and chained and released one, and then he'd tie another, and then release another, and slud it down there. But I
It was on the parking lot there for the racetrack. I've got that right.
Yeah, it's
There's
south side of
you,
Katy.
your wife
Yeah.
are there, and I'm there. Somebody took a picture of us. We're all wearing bell-bottom pants.
But what I'm amazed at, and it can happen to any of you, is that I met a woman one day who said, here, like a week ago, who said, oh, I ran a little restaurant by John Carlo's house, by the manager, no, by the owner
Yeah.
of the racetrack. She didn't know he didn't own the whole thing. The owner of the racetrack, I said, you mean John Carlo? And she said, that's his name. And I said, his secretary's name was Margaret Zadie.
Right.
Yeah, I met her in the big building one day. But she said, I did food 24 hours a day in that building for John Carlo.
Wow.
I met her here last week.
Wow.
That's
Small
why.
world.
Oh, that's why that little card I gave each of you.
Yep.
Do you each have a
Well,
little
we
card?
That they're holding for
It says
posterity,
yes.
yeah.
Well, each of you get one. Now you want to write the date on there is December 10th, 1918.
Okay.
What night? What happened December 18th, 1918?
He was born. He was
That's
born.
what's on that card. And then you can put down the present date. Then my wife's date is November of 19.
19.
You see, we were both, and I knew you were going to ask about this. We were both conceived to keep our fathers from being in World War One.
There you go.
My dad's brother was in Germany, and he sent a penny postcard, said it's bad over here. There's mud and Germans, and it's a mess.
Yeah.
And do something. Maybe have a baby.
There you go.
My parents did do. And then I was a disappointment because I was born 2 weeks after the war was over.
Over.
Now,
Now you're just a
but
mouth to
other
feed.
people went to more trouble. His aunt's parents were in the Philippines, and they went there in 15 or 13 or something, and by 17 things got bad, or 16. And so they had had one child there, her older brother, and they came back. Took them 2 months to get back to Benzonia, Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
And they too thought that he, being a farmer, would get him off, but it didn't. So they too ingested a child, and she was born also disappointment 4 months after the war was over. So we're both unneeded children.
Yeah. Yeah. Did they
Yeah.
take you back?
Well,
Did they ever
tried.
bring that up?
Yeah. In fact, that's one thing I've told several people, that we are both so, because we're both unneeded children, that we married because we
Something
had,
to come.
we had to
Yeah,
get
we
married.
needed each
We
other.
had to get married. And they said, "Why do you have to get married?" And we said, "Well, because my wife doesn't drive and I don't cook."
There you go.
It's worked out well for both of us.
Anything about the school move? I know you've only
Sure.
described you as-
I got a phone call. Was it from you?
Probably.
It's probably Jim got the honor of calling me up, and he said, yeah, we got a schoolhouse to move or whatever, and I think it was either you or Berkman. I think it's,
That was me, I think.
and I said, well, I never moved a building before, but I'll give it a shot. And the first slide I took shows my son at about age 2.5. No, real early.
Okay, so
3 years old, 4 years old, a little tiny guy. And I noticed that my brand new 1974, that was the year, non-Ford, although I worked at Ford, Japanese, cars parked at a great distance from the building itself. And the reason is the building looks so god-awful, I was afraid to drive my car near it. It's parked out on the road where there's a circular drive up to the building. The building was last used in 1966. I did an oral history. I got some records from a descendant of one of the school teachers. And those are in the Historical Society's collections, or should be. And
the picture of the last day of school with the kids with a big
right,
Question mark.
Northville record, the question mark, and the littlest kid being the dot and the question mark. What's going to happen to our school? A couple years after 66, even though there were only diesel trains, somehow a spark from a train lit a fire. I personally think out there that it was somebody burning in the spring, and the fire got away from them, high winds, and they were fighting to save their own buildings. And then all of a sudden he said, what about the schoolhouse? And he drove over to the schoolhouse, and the flames had come from that fire up between the walls and singed the roof trusses, and and at the time I saw it, there was no roof and there was no gables. They were on the ground, and it shows charcoal in my car in the far distance. And it was rough. It was rough. And
We had to hire a fellow who had worked on the bridge at Ford Village. What's Ford?
Greenfield Village.
Greenfield Village. And it turned out it was Kaus.
yeah, the builder.
And we had the builder Kaus come, and he overcharged us several times and left us with a wheelbarrow and about 500 feet of rope that nobody wanted. And but he put in all new joists along the bottom, because several of us walked on the floor and said, "This is for children, not for adults." Tore out the whole.
Essentially,
The
from
whole
the
floor.
sill beams down is all new. And I, being a mechanical engineer and licensed by the state of Michigan to protect, public health, safety, and welfare, I made it so it hold up 10 schoolhouses filled with people.
But
You know.
it wasn't good that the roof was gone. I mean, it was cheaper to bring the thing in.
It,
under
w-
all
it,
wire.
well,
Oh.
the thing that was really good was the bicentennial. Everybody you dealt with was helping you. The counties, the cities, the police departments, the sheriff's departments, the consumers' power.
Yeah.
They had a rule. If it was 18 feet or lower loaded height, they would raise the wires. If you're under that, they wouldn't charge you for raising the wire because it's supposed to be that high. We were a little over, and they all looked the other way. And so the move was quite,
There's no roof on it.
yeah, and it's quite inexpensive, although very tedious, move, because we couldn't get through at the former high school site on the hill because of the pedestrian overpass. We didn't have enough clearance. So, it was a roundabout route to bring in the schoolhouse. And I want to mention Dale Wilkie and his wife, Julie,
The
because
B-man.
because he was the schoolhouse guy. I had a fear of heights. I did go up on the roof, and for 10 minutes I was frozen in place.
There's no roof on it, and it's like that for quite a while.
Yeah, but he,
Chap came along who said, "I have a son who's a carpenter.
yeah, this good
Would
stuff.
you like a donation for the roof if you will pay for the wood? I think I could pay for the labor for the carpenter, my son. And he will do all the work." And so we were able to get enough wood there for that fellow to come, and the man gave a donation to the society. We gave it to the carpenter.
To his son, because he wouldn't take money from his father, but he needed it to live.
That's right.
Well, it's a donation for him.
And,
Yeah.
and that's the first I ever saw Reinhold's go up with his shoes on, with a pack of shingles, and that's the first I had heard one of these things where a hose goes somewhere, and all at once shingles, ching, 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 ching.
Right.
And these guys are walking up and down there. I'm like, I don't want to watch Reinhold's anymore.
The
And Reinhold's son was there because he'd had a parking violation or something, and Reinhold's son was working with him,
Yeah.
putting shingles on that roof.
the shingles themselves were stapled on, and I, being
No,
a
they were
cautious
copper
person,
staples.
yeah, whatever they were, but I had them checked at General Motors where I worked in the research lab for the corrosion resistance, which was a standard automotive test, salt spray, 100-hour salt spray test
I
or
gotta
something.
go.
Because we wanted to make sure these newfangled shingles
Got an appointment?
wouldn't rust out.
with the plumbing.
Yeah.
Oh, with the plumbing, all right.
Maybe you've heard his name.
There you go.
Okay.
I love sit down. I love the work you've done on the historic science.
Thank you.
You see, what my wife and I do here is we take the bus from here and we go and periodically.
Well, I think they did a pretty good job.
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't know, for those of us that
Seaman Heights Park too.
are still here, and
What?
those
They're
that
like down
weren't,
behind.
but are.
We could have
Nice.
another session
Yeah.
if you wanted to.
Yeah.
We've done so much.
You know,
work with the council.
Because Jim is here until the 30th, but, it's
How
up to
many
you
meetings
guys.
can you
I'm
say?
not sure how much more tape.
Okay.
I
I'm
just,
so glad.
I do want to ask these guys something before they leave though.
Yeah.
And Fran, I have a question for you before you leave. Can I ask it quick if you have to go? The Veterans Board of Honor, Wall of Honor that was uptown, where they listed the soldiers' names. It was a big
There's a
board?
big board, and we don't know which buildings were missing from the 1928 fire, so there's a space there. Bruce doesn't know. Bruce Turnbull doesn't know.
He said, he just
doesn't
told
know.
us it was Main Center, where the Ambler Hotel was, is where he told us that board was. But we get all kinds of
I
different,
wasn't there, but he came here in 19,
yeah.
and I didn't come here until 50 or whenever I came.
It was World War II board? Or World
Oh
War
yes,
it
that was
two.
World
Okay.
War II,
I thought so, okay,
and Bruce may know.
okay. Thank you.
Also, Laura Hickson's picture file.
Yes, and she's dead.
Yes, but the
But we have a
pictures,
picture- we have her-
I would go through that file because she did more to locate old photographs and copy
Okay,
them for the
she sure
Historical
did.
Society. It might be there.
We have a snapshot of it, but because it's too close, we can't.
And it's
tell
so
where
close,
is.
it doesn't give sides.
Doesn't
or-
get sight- There's nothing
Yeah,
behind it. which
it's
I
just
think
the
is
sign
why
itself
yeah.
without a
Oh,
context,
there's no
yeah.
curve there or anything.
Okay.
Okay, and what did you want to ask me, Nancy?
Yeah, I just, it's apparent to me that you guys spend a lot of time of your life moving these buildings, and I just wanted to ask you what drove.
They were going to tear this nice old town down, and the old people, I mean, you know, we're in our whatever years we were. I didn't realize how much.
We were in
We were in
our
our-
20s,
we
you
were
were
in
in
our-
your 50s.
Yeah,
I was in
30s
my
and
30s, yeah.
Yeah.
But these
30s,
guys
yeah.
in their 70s and 80s, they were livid about it. They were just livid about their towns, and the women, the Mothers Club, they went crazy. The Northville Women's Club went crazy about this. They were all old women, and they were going to save their town.
So how did you guys come together to decide we're gonna save this church?
It was piecemeal.
Yeah.
It was
but
Gasly did
focused
some
around the
stuff.
Historical
We
Society.
just
Yeah.
grabbed anybody who was anybody. If you saw them twice, they were
Well,
stuck.
plus you could see things happening down there.
Oh,
Just, you know, a car driving by,
and
sub will stop.
What made you decide which buildings to save?
They sort of presented themselves,
Yeah.
I'd say.
We had some offered that we didn't want to.
Right.
Because they would want their name on it. And the one thing we decided is we have to decide what happens to that.
And two, I think there was the realization Chatham Supermarket essentially destroyed some really nice old buildings, and it's a
Oh,
big
beautiful.
gaping hole at the side of a hill, and people reacted to what they saw as unimprovement.
Right.
You know, this modernization has certain negatives,
Well,
and
remember
I
the
think that
first-
was also part of it.
The first edition in town was right by where the, what you would call the Northville Lumber Yard. There's a Berkman house, and right next to it, the Berkmans put in an addition of one-story modern houses, which were a visual disaster. And people
Unfortunate.
were worried that
yeah.
this would happen everywhere. And so last the money came after that, then the bigger houses started.
So you say the fear of losing the town's identity kind of drove
Physical
the-
identity.
Well, we see
Physical
what
identity
happened. The
sort of drove everybody
we
together.
saw Farmington get wiped out, and then Novi and what do they call that thing?
Green,
Main Street,
Green
Novi.
Novi Town Center?
Yeah.
Oh, 12 Oaks.
Oh, 12 Oaks, so
So,
this-
oh no, they can't do that. Well, that happened after us.
The mauling of
So I have to
America,
go
yeah.
back.
How do you guys feel about what you actually created there?
Oh, it's excellent. I mean, for example, if you
beautiful.
go and see weddings in the summer in the gazebo, which is a reconstruction or, you know, whatever you want to call it, but when
I'm
you
appalled and love it
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
I went 3 times to watch the guys build the store. Man, if we'd spend time like that, we'd still be 185 years old. And we just put the boards up. These fellows said, no, the grain isn't quite right there. We're like, oh, no.
Yeah, I remember on the New School Church building, my first day on the work site, you know, they give me a chisel and a hammer, and I'm supposed to cut out the rotten wood and the sill beam, you know, starting at this one quarter, the northeast quarter. And I think I'd still be there today with that chisel because, you know, that beam was rotten. And that's why there was so much structure put in underneath to make up for what was failing there from the,
Thank you for not charging for entertainment.
Okay,
Thanks for having us, Craig.
okay.
Well,
It's just a nice serene place today. I mean, you can walk down there in the summer and it's just,
Yeah, you go down there at
It's,
night or early in the morning and you're alone, and there's, waterfowl on the pond or whatever, or in the winter. This town was surrounded by countryside. The phone number 349 is something short for like Meadowbrook.
It's FI9,
Okay, and
Firestone.
okay, and they actually one winter, I saw these footprints in the ice and snow of the pond frozen over, and I go, "What the heck is this?" Well, what it was a guy walking his trap line catching muskrat. And I think, Bill, I met a fellow at your house that you were helping out. Bill's family, over all the years that I've known him, has helped people. They live in his house. They provide help to individuals, who are in need of some support. And I remember the guy smelling tremendously of smoke. And he was real grubby. He's a young guy. And it turns out he was living on the old Chase farm back there in an abandoned farm building, and he was keeping himself warm with a 50-gallon drum with the top cut off and hopefully some air holes at the bottom, and he was burning wood, and he was standing in the smoke or sleeping in the smoke area. So, that was the kind of town I came to, was sort of the antithesis of, quote, up to date with all its, pluses but minuses too,
where would you like to see the Historical Society go from here?
Well, I think it's got a village to maintain as part of the community, and it seems to be going along fine. New generations have come.
that was the big fear when we first started it, is can it be maintained? And how will it be maintained?
Yeah,
And,
once you start something, you've
yeah,
got to be able to see it
it's,
through.
you hate to do all this and then just see it rot in place, but everybody's done a really good job, coming through. So,
What do you think it was worth all the effort you guys put into it?
Oh yeah,
I think it was.
I've never heard anybody complain about the time they spent.
No, I mean, there was a lot of camaraderie, too.
yeah, there was.
Well, and you learned a lot of stuff you didn't know that you used on your own house.
And a lot of guys had come down, they didn't know how to do things,
Right.
and you just, they
Yeah.
learned.
That was like Dale Wilkie with the schoolhouse, and his own home needed tremendous help. And I felt bad that I had talked him
Which
into
is
this.
the home, coincidentally
Yes.
enough, that our daughter is
Is
now
living in, yes.
and son-in-law.
It went from Dr. Murky, who worked at the tuberculosis sanitarium out there, which is now a state park, Maybury. And when she became too old to take care of herself, she went into assisted living. And when she passed, she donated the house to where she got her doctorate in chemistry, University of Chicago. And they had no use for a house in Northville, and they put it up for sale. And then Dale and his wife bought it. Wolke went from Murky to Wolke, and now it's your daughter's living there. Yep.
Yeah.
So it's it's recycling, but it's keeping the history of the place intact. And of course, history books have now been written, and you can go to the library in the high school or whatever, and you can read about your community, and not its earliest days, but you can find Indian artifacts. If you live where I live on 10 acres, you find Indian, arrowheads or stone tools and so on and so forth. So there's a continuity rather than, a sense of we don't know where we were, and as well as we don't know where we're going. At least you know where you were, as a people.
Would you say this is one of your greatest achievements? I mean, of all the projects you've done, and
Most satisfying, pretty much, other than teaching, maybe. Yeah. But, you see somebody going to a wedding there, getting married there, or just having a photo shoot there. Everybody's young and all dressed up, and
I guess, Nancy, I look at it as a legacy. We were there at the time, And, you know, yeah, we did participate and contribute, and we consider that a privilege
Yeah.
that we were able to do
Yeah.
that. But it is a legacy that, you know, is now left for, you know, future generations. And it isn't the prime historical restoration, because these buildings are not on their original sites. But I think there was enough thought put into how it was arranged and how it was done, so that it made a cohesive little mini village all of its own that, you know, would have been like it could have been. And you know, and just the fact that the buildings were preserved, you know, is a major thing.
And it shows the different types of architecture. I think that you know, the Victorian and the Hunter House,
Yeah.
as well as some of the commercial buildings. So
Well, the schoolhouse is, you know, heavily
Schoolhouse.
used for
Yeah.
education.
right.
And you know, it's sort of a low pressure place. You can walk in any time of day to the site, you know, and it's tied into that park area, the old Ford Field. You know, it serves the community in a number of ways, really.
I just want to thank you on behalf of the Northville Historical Society.
Okay.
We've picked up the legacy.
Great.
We hope to keep it going on for generations to come.
Great.
I hope so. Yeah.
Thank you, folks.
Doing a good
Okay.
job.
Yeah, thank you.
for doing this.
Okay.
I was just sitting here going, this is cool. Go ahead and talk, I don't care. I'm sure she's over there going, stay on task, stay on task. No, this is cool. I'm having a good time.
Well, it gives you a much better flavor if you
just let things,
yeah,
let things
yeah.
flow. And a lot of it gets edited out, especially some of
Yeah.
Frank's salty stuff. And some of it was definitely off task, but it brought you back around to where you were,
Yeah.
where you were getting. So that was
Thanks,
neat.
Linda, very much.